Hello and welcome to today's webinar on ESTCP Funding Opportunities. My name is Laura Mack and I will be moderating today's session. We will get started in just a few moments. While we wait for others to join, I would like to cover a few logistical items. Today's broadcast will be listen only. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. You may submit questions by using the Q&A box on the black control panel on your screen. You do not need to wait until the Q&A period to submit your questions. In fact, we encourage you to submit them in advance of that session. The phone lines will remain listen only throughout the presentation, so we will be not taking any questions verbally. We will also not be able to answer questions about specific proposal ideas or technologies during this webinar. If you run into any technical problems, please send your issues through the chat box, which is also found on your control panel. Please note that both the audio and the presentation of today's session will be archived on our solicitation webpage in case you would like to refer to them in the future. Today's speakers are Dr. Herb Nelson, the Executive Director of ESTCP, Dr. Andrea Leeson, the Deputy Director of ESTCP and the Environmental Restoration Program Manager, Dr. Robin Nissan, the Weapons Systems and Platforms Program Manager, Dr. Kurt Preston, the Resource Conservation and Resiliency Program Manager, and Dr. Dave Bradley, the Munitions Response Program Manager. Before I turn it over to Herb, I would like to remind phone participants that this is a listen-only session, and to submit questions, please use the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. Off to you, Herb.
Thank you very much, Laura. I'd like to echo Laura's welcome to you all. I see we have quite a good attendance today. I see a few names in there in the list that I recognize, but I see a whole lot that I don't recognize. So that's really good. That's the point of this, to make sure that people that are new to our program get to find out how we work. So let me just tell you how this is going to go. We have a short introductory section that I'm going to give that gives a little more details about the program, talks about some of the dates, some of the key logistic stuff that is required. And then we'll turn it over to the program manager sequentially, who will give a brief introduction to the topics that we're soliciting for this year. At the end of that, as Laura's already said, we'll go to a question and answer time. So, and I'll echo what Laura said to you just a minute ago. If you think of a question while even on my second slide or even on this slide, start typing it in now. It'll just be at the top of the queue and we can get to it. Next slide, please, Laura. So just to remind you, some of you know this, but not all, we are really two companion programs. On the left is the Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program, which, as it says, is a science and technology program. The call for proposals for fiscal 23 has already come and gone for CERTA. So the point of today's call, and we're concerned with the call for proposals for the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program. And that's what the Department of Defense calls a Demonstration Validation Program, or 6-4 program. And as we'll talk through in a couple of slides now, what that really entails in terms of the work we're looking to support. Next slide, please, Laura. So this just shows you the standard Department of Defense technology development process, and we follow exactly that for environmental technologies. We receive requirements from the military departments and services for what are the needs. CERTA supports basic and applied research and what we call advanced development. And then we move on to ESTCP, and that's demonstration validation. This, of course, makes it look like CERTA flows right into ESTCP, and in a lot of cases it does, but there's no requirement at all that the technologies that we would demonstrate in ESTCP have been in CERTA. They could have been developed independently through other government funding or through self-funding. So this is both a follow-on to CERTA and a new program completely, depending on the circumstances. Next slide, please, Laura. So for purposes of management and for talking about these topics and for working on evaluating proposals, we divide ourselves into these 5 program areas. Starting in the top right, we have environmental restoration, which, as you can see from the photo, is the traditional chemical cleanup, contaminant removal operations. Munitions response in the bottom right, which, as the photo shows you, is mostly concerned with unexploded ordnance underwater. Over to the bottom left is the Resource and Conservation and Resiliency Program area, which has a wide range of both natural resources and resilience topics that Kurt Preston will talk about a little later on. At the top left is the Weapons Systems and Platforms Program area, which also has pretty wide-ranging responsibilities, all things to do with the defense industrial base, coatings, lubrications, things like that. And then finally, installation, energy, and water, which has to do with resilience, primarily of the energy and water infrastructure at the DoD installations. Next slide, please, Laura. So we are really driven by two sets of requirements. It's sort of a very DoD word, but one of those is to look at things like resilience, which I just spoke about in the Installation, Energy, and Water program. This is an example from Resource Conservation and Resiliency shown in the top left of the slide. Sustaining the ranges, helping the DoD installation managers carry out their threatened and endangered species responsibilities while keeping training lands available, looking at wild and fire. That's one set. The next set, Laura, next slide, please, is the reduction of current and future liability for environmental issues. So on the left, clearly those are cleanup type issues, and that's in environmental restoration and munitions response. And on the right-hand side of this slide is what used to be called pollution prevention, where we don't want to make the same mistakes now. So there's an ESTCP in 20 years doing the same thing we're doing now. Next slide, please, Laura. So here are the goals of ESTCP, and you ought to have been able to figure most of this out from the talk we've already done. But we want to demonstrate innovative environmental technologies and installation energy technologies on DoD installation. We want to capitalize on our past investments. That's sort of the flow from CERTA, but also past investments in other programs. And we want to move technology out of the lab past the final report of a R&D program into practice. So that's the second large bullet. We are really looking to promote implementation of these. So that's why we work on DoD installation, so we can directly insert it into the DoD. We work carefully with the regulatory community so we can get everybody on board. And of course, our priority is the needs of the DoD user community. There's a lot of problems out there that are environmental in nature that are not DoD problems. We focus on DoD problems. Next slide, please, Laura. So these are the hallmarks. The top bullet is what we're looking for. The bottom bullet is what technologies are too mature for us. So what we're looking for is technologies that have a lot of data, maybe in a laboratory setting or in the backyard of the installation, but can really need to do a demonstration on a DoD installation under real world conditions. So that way we can properly assess the cost and the performance of the technology. As I say, under conditions it will be implemented. And then we can use this information in the demonstration to move either through the firm that's doing the demonstration toward commercialization or broader adoption through the DoD if it's a technology that may be contracted out. Either way, we're trying to move things out of the lab, out of the early demonstration phase into adoption, into use. Now, of course, the kicker to that is if it is so mature that it's a commercial technology, if it's already being used, then it's not really something that needs a demonstration. So it might be cool to go another demo and it might be cool to go do something else again, but that's not a very good use of our dollars. So there's definitely a sweet spot in terms of technological maturity that matches up with ESTCP. Next slide, please, Laura. So as I've already said, the first bullet in several times, we're going to hit it again here. Our methodology is to partner with stakeholders, meaning DoD users, sometimes the regulatory community, and test these things at DoD facilities. So you can see all the people that might be used. We want the developer of the technology, the end users, and the regulators. So everybody that will be involved in ultimate use, we want on board on this so we can get a transition. We definitely are looking to validate the operational cost and performance. Of course, I say this sometimes, the best is twice as effective at half the cost. That's the goal. Obviously, that doesn't work all the time, but that's where we're going, something like that. And then we're very focused on technology transfer, and you will see as we talk about things that are hallmarks of a successful proposal, to really have in mind technology transfer, because the goal of ESTCP is not a report, it is to see technologies transition. Next slide, please, Laura. So we use a very formal requirement for ESTCP projects. The first one I think is the most important. We look for detailed demonstration plans before a demonstration ever gets started. And what we're really looking for there is lay out the success criteria, lay out how how results will be measured to decide whether we passed or failed. We get that reviewed independently, then everything is on the record. There's no deciding after the fact that, well, that wasn't an important criterion or not. So we want everything written down up front. Then we go off and do the technology demonstration, collecting these cost and performance data, and then we write a report. And of course, we want the report. We don't write, you write a report. What we want these reports to say, as I said earlier, works twice as well at half the cost. But every once in a while, it works half as well at twice the cost. And that's not good, but it's a lot better than not knowing. So that's also an acceptable outcome for us. And then, as I've said several times, and we're going to say several more times, we always want to support the transition. So we want to be looking, even at the demonstration plan stage, to how we're going to get user acceptance, how we're going to turn the results we've got into it, and maybe guidance for further use, maybe take some of our results and set up a training plan for installation personnel. And of course, that will be specific to each individual demonstration, but we want to keep our eyes on that. Next slide, please, Laura. So here is the process. Now we're sort of into that's the overview of what we're looking for. Here we are into the nuts and bolts of how it works. 2 weeks ago, we put out a call, and it's really a 3-prong call. There's a broad agency announcement for private sector people. There's a Department of Defense call for scientists and engineers at Department of Defense laboratories. And then there's a third call for federal organizations that are outside DoD. All 3 request a pre-proposal. You probably figured out by now that we use the pre-proposal full proposal model. So all 3 request a pre-proposal, excuse me. Those will be looked at by the individual program areas to make sure that you're trying to answer the question that we're asking, to make sure that the technology is at the appropriate maturity. You'll see all that in a few minutes. From that, we will request full proposals. Full proposals, then both a written proposal and then an in-person briefing to the technical committees, which leads to selections. Next slide, please. And here's the timing for all of that on the next slide. So as I said, a couple of weeks ago, we released the solicitation. The pre-proposals will be due in the second week of March. Full proposals requests will try to get out by June for due in August. Our goal is really to give you at least 8 weeks to turn the pre-proposal into full proposal. Sometimes we can get 10, but we'll do the best we can on that. And then after full proposals are in, we'll schedule the briefings before the technical committee sometime in September. All of this is pointing toward a project selection in October of 22, which is when the new fiscal year starts. And then project initiation after contracting and money transfers and delays on budgets and all the things that go on. We hope to start these things in the spring of 23. Next slide, please, Laura. So the requirement, what we're looking for is a little bit different for each of those 3 calls that I talked about on 2 slides ago. So let's talk first about the broad agency announcement and the calls that federal organizations outside of the DoD can reply to. So we've got specific topic areas in each of the program areas. They will be talked about in 3 or 4 slides now. I think it starts on slide 17 or 18. They'll be talked about by each of the program areas. So there's step number 1 in judging a pre-proposal. Does it respond to the topics we're looking for? Obviously, I've said several times now, we do a short written pre-proposal. It's 5-page limit. So we want to get your idea on a piece of paper, and then we can match up with all the criteria that you'll see in a slide or 2 from now. If needed, if it's somebody that's new to this process and needs to do a demonstration in a DoD site and doesn't know how the DoD works and needs introductions, we identify for you a DoD liaison, often from the technical committee, who can help you with selecting the site, can get you in contact with who you need to contact at the installation, sort of navigate DoD for you. You don't have to come in knowing all of that. And then, of course, if we make a selection, we ask for a full proposal. The next slide, please. So things are a little bit broader for people at the DoD laboratories. Here, we're a little more open, a little wider on the topics we will suggest. So certainly you will know by looking at the BAA topics what's on the top of our mind. But sometimes the people in the laboratories know a little bit better than we do what is the specific requirement. So we're a little more open to a wider range of inputs from the DoD people. Otherwise, it's the same, a short written pre-proposal on to selection. Next slide, please. So as promised a minute ago, here are the selection criteria. And I hope these are don't surprise anyone. Clearly, relevance, meaning are you addressing a topic that we're interested in, is a pass-fail gate. Is the technology you're proposing the right stage of maturity for an ESTCP demonstration? That's a pass-fail gate. Once you get past those gates, now they are the standard selection criteria, the technical merit of the proposal, the cost benefit of it. Are we going to spend $10 million demonstrating something that might only save 100? That's obviously not a very good investment of our money. We, of course, look at the transition potential because we're all about moving these technologies along. And then finally is the total cost of the project. Next slide, please. So people often ask, and we put this in here to give guidance. I hope these things are all obvious, but here's what it takes. Here are the criteria. Here are the hallmarks, of course, as the title says, of a competitive proposal. And I've said this several times, it clearly addresses a topic area. If you find yourself stretching your technology as hard as you can stretch or squeeze to get it to fit one of our topic areas, that's probably not the best use of your time. There'll be a lot of people that will have something much more up the alley of the topic area, and they'll have an advantage. You definitely want well-defined demonstration questions. Things like, does this work under these conditions? Can I tune it such that I bring it in as a lower cost? What happens if there's a background of some chemical that we didn't anticipate? Those are the kind of demonstration questions you want to be posing. Of course, we want benefits. You need to demonstrate to us the possibility at least of reduced cost and improved performance. I think everybody that has a new technology thinks they've got that. And then, of course, the whole, is this a sound proposal? Have you described the technology well? Have you posed well-defined performance objectives? Remember, we want to write down in advance what are going to be the success criteria. And then, of course, you're very detailed on how the technical approach is going to work. And with that, that's the end of the introductory part of the this presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Andrea Leeson, who's going to start talking about the particular topic areas.
Great, thank you, Herb. All right, we are going to move into talking a little more specifically about the technical topics that were released. And how we're going to do this is that each program manager will discuss the topics that were released under their program area. You can also find their contact information in the technical topics or the topic areas on the website as well. So each program manager's contact information is associated with a topic area so that if you have more detailed questions, something you don't understand about the topic area, you can contact them directly if we don't get to your question today. If you have a question today, please put it in the Q&A, and that's the best place to put it versus the chat room. I will say, though, that the questions should be limited to try to better understand the topic area or better understand the DoD need that is being solicited for. We don't answer specific questions about your idea. So we cannot vet an idea for you before you submit the pre-proposal. That's really the intent of the pre-proposal, is for you to submit a brief summary of your idea so that we can see if it's relevant and matches the needs. Next topic. So first, I wanted to talk about one general interest topic area, if you could go to the next slide. And this is applicable to all of the program areas where we're looking for innovative technology transfer approaches. So we really look at this in two ways. Technology, and before I talk about that, I just want to say how important technology transfer is to the program. We consider this critical aspect of getting a technology into more broad scale use. Without the technology transfer component, generally technologies will languish on the shelves and will not be utilized. So this is a critical part of the entire process. Having said that, often you get to the end of a project and you do a little bit of technology transfer, but at that time it may be apparent that a larger push is needed. So this topic area is ideal for that, where you can propose a particular type of technology transfer that will help get a technology that was demonstrated under ESTCP out into broader use. That can be looking at different types of communities of interest, generally the end users, and how best to interact with them. That has taken the form of in-person classes, around the country. We have done different web-based applications. I'm particularly fond of more of interactive types of approaches. And so it can be targeted around that kind of technology transfer, where you're either focusing on a technology that came out of ESTCP, or it can be on a body of knowledge that's been developed. For example, we had a short course that was developed under our technology transfer area that focused on monitored natural attenuation and really pulled together all of the work that had been done on monitored natural attenuation under CERTA, as well as ESTCP over the years. So it can be bigger picture. We're also interested, though, in technology transfer approaches that are more generic and are more about a new sort of platform that can be used for all different sorts of technologies. And so those are of interest too. I have yet to see anyone come up with an app for their technology transfer. So really trying to think outside the box of how best to get these out into to the end user and to commercial use. Next slide. So at this point, let's talk about the environmental restoration topic areas. And next slide. First, I will talk about those that are from the broad agency announcement, and that is for the private sector. These two topic areas are also applicable to the non-DoD federal agencies, so you look at both. Our first is management of impacted groundwater. We have had a similar topic area for several years now, as this is one of the, our issues with impacted groundwater really drive the costs at many of our sites in terms of marching towards closure. So we've listed in the topic area the chemicals of particular concern, which of course include PFAS, but also chlorinated solvents, energetic compounds, and we always leave it open to emerging chemicals of interest to the DoD, and we have not provided a list of those. But if you submit a proposal and you think that there is a chemical of concern that should be addressed, please just make the case for that in your pre-proposal and it would fit under here. There are a number of workshop reports that are listed at the bottom of this slide that are relevant, and these are good to look at. They're getting a little elderly now in terms of our implementation of those, and thanks to COVID, we haven't been able to have our in-person strategic meetings, which I hope to change this year. But there is still some good information in there about different data gaps that we're interested in. And with the PFAS issues themselves, at the bottom of the slide, you'll see that there is a link to the QA/QC guidelines that we expect for all projects that are working on PFAS under CERTA and ESTCP. So please take a look at that so you understand what we expect. I also want to mention at this point as well, if you go into our demonstration plan guidelines on our website, it's pretty easy to find under investigator resources. There's good information there in terms of what we expect for crafting a demonstration. And so it's helpful to look at that to think about different questions to address. Next slide. We also released a topic area on the long-term management of impacted aquatic sediments. And these are like the sediments you'd find in harbors, riverways, things like this. Generally, the contaminants of concern there are things like PAHs, PCBs, heavy metals. We have some concern about PFAS, though, that we've added there. And so that is also in the list, as well as chemicals of emerging concern. So all of these are of interest. And what we're really looking for is kind of a mix of, we're always open to more cost-effective in situ remedial technologies, as well as the application and commercialization of specific passive samplers, methodologies for amendment placements, and some monitoring tools. So please take a look at that as well. Next slide. I wanted to show this slide very quick. PFAS is an issue of tremendous concern for us, and many of our projects now are on PFAS. And I've put in the chat room the link for this slide. I mention it because it is interactive if you go online. So each of the boxes shown here represent a group of projects that have been funded under CERTIP or ESTCP. It's just very helpful to get an idea of what we are funding in the programs to help guide what you may propose on. I think someone just asked when you said to resend the slide here, you probably meant the link, so I'll have someone copy that over and post the link again so you can get that. Next slide. And then we'll move into the topic areas for the DoD organizations. Next slide. These are quite a bit more broad, as typically this is an ESTCP, this is a DoD program, and so we anticipate if you're with the DoD, you have a very keen understanding of the issues for the DoD. So we have kept this very broad. You can see that there's there's 6 unique topics here that you can submit towards. I do want to note that the DoD investigators, we just have a sentence here about being able to respond to the BAA technology transfer topic area that was released. So for the details of that, please go to the BAA topic area for that. Next slide. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Dave Bradley, and he's going to talk about the munitions response program area topics. Dave?
Thanks, Andrea. Hello, everybody, and welcome. One of the things, Laura, next slide, please. One of the things you'll hear from me is drawing comparisons with the land version of this program, which is operational and very successful. So some of the first questions you might ask is, what areas are we interested in? It says underwater. What that really translates into is the beach, out to 100+ feet in water depth. So it's from wet sand to reasonable water depths. The targets we're looking for are either on the bottom, they may be partially buried, they may be fully buried. And one of the painful things that we've learned, which is again now contrary to the circumstances with the land program, is that there is no single sensor that works everywhere and all the time. Laura, next slide. Actually, the next one is a title slide for DoD orgs. So go to the last MR slide. Thank you. There's a number of items here. One of the key things is traditional removal. Traditional removal would be things like blow in place, or perhaps somehow dredge it out, whatever. We're getting hemmed in, and quite frankly, doing things like blowing in place and leaving residues of nasty chemicals in the water just is not going to happen any longer. Blowing in place also has some potential to endanger species that need to be protected, marine species that need to be protected. A key thing, because you see the words a number of times, is cost effectiveness. Location is critical. On land, it was quite easy to get within a shovel width of a particular location. In the water, that kind of dimension is impossible. But yet we have to still zero in because the cost to relocate something is beyond what we anticipate. The old adage, time is money, of course, applies everywhere. Land surveys morph, involving 1 to 2 people, morph into a ship, a boat crew, sensor handlers, analysts, So you're talking roughly an order of magnitude increase in the number of people involved. So understanding the environment to allow rapid surveying is absolutely critical. And finally, removal and or remediation is expensive. So a logical decision that may be reached is leaving the munition in place. If that's the case, there's a requirement to develop an understanding of movement of those munitions under dynamic underwater conditions. Extremes, of course, would be things like hurricanes. And with that, I'll turn the helm over to Dr. Kurt Preston.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Kurt Preston. I'm the Resource Conservation and Resiliency Program Manager. Next slide, please. So we'll just walk through our call for proposals. The first is the call on the time series and new site updates for the Defense Regional Sea Level Rise Database. A couple of things we're looking to do there is to extend the time series of records for the dorsal database, update the algorithms that are used from the original database, and to look to provide credible estimates of still water levels and update and provide initial estimates of extreme water levels for each dorsal scenario. And then finally, to provide a defensible basis for the appropriate frequency into the future that we want to update the dorsal database. If you're not familiar with the dorsal database, it is publicly available using your favorite search engine. Next slide, please. The next call for proposals is focused on the improvement of wildland fire management tools and their use on testing and training lands. What we're looking for there is the demonstration of innovative but technically mature tools and methodologies associated with the management of wildfires and wildland fire. We're looking to integrate emerging technology and novel data sources for fire management applications. And we want the ESTCP effort to be able to evaluate and demonstrate technologies that are mature enough to be transitioned for use by natural resource managers, wildland fire managers, and other ecosystem management professionals. Next slide, please. Next call for proposals is associated with the biological control of non-indigenous or invasive species that have the potential to impact military testing and training activities. I will stress that in particular, we're looking at biological controls. And as the director, Dr. Nelson mentioned, the purpose of ESTCP is to help technologies across the so-called valley of death. And so we're looking for efforts that will look at existing and novel biocontrol techniques that meet the USDA and other requirements. And we are looking for biocontrol techniques that can be integrated into current practices. Next slide, please. The next call for proposals is looking at the analysis of impact of weather events on Department of Defense installations. And there we want to assess the impacts of past weather events, often or mostly recent past weather events on DoD installations to inform the department on mitigation strategies, improvement of emergency procedures, recovery plans, and rebuilding designs. We're looking for efforts that will identify modes of failure for infrastructure, that examine baseline conditions and considerations of building vintage, construction, materials, and techniques, and improvements in the pricing and cost of damage associated with individual weather events. Next slide, please. The call for proposals here is to look at improving the climate resilience of Department of Defense installations in the context of the surrounding community infrastructure. We want to improve the ability of Department of Defense installation planners to work with surrounding communities to demonstrate and implement strategies and investments. In particular, we're looking for approaches to identify and prioritize and implement mitigation and adaptation measures to climate impacts, and demonstrate ways to share and integrate data effectively and efficiently with surrounding communities. I will note that both in this effort and the previous one described that the technology solutions that are identified through the projects that are selected, towards the end of those projects may be invited to submit proposals for demonstration projects that are follow-on activities. Next slide, please. So now we'll turn very quickly to the calls for proposals associated with DoD, Department of Defense organizations. Next slide, please. And as Andrea mentioned, these are more broadly defined and really in 4 focus areas. First, natural resources generally, focused on ecological systems. The second broad area, missions, looks and invites proposals associated with the active management of dust, fire, and other emissions. Resiliency, a continuum of infrastructure and natural built, both natural and built infrastructure, technologies and methodologies. And then the special interest topics are those that have just previously described. Next slide, please. I will be followed by my good friend and esteemed colleague, Robin Neeson.
Thank you, Kurt. So Weapon Systems and Platforms program area. We only have this year, we only have a call for proposals from DoD organizations. I will state up front, that doesn't mean that industry or academia can't be part of. We all often get proposals, pre-proposals that come from a DoD organization with a partner in industry or academia. The reason for this in Weapon Systems and Platforms is that we really feel that we want to make sure there is a close connection between a DoD organization and the demonstration. So let's go to the next slide, please. And as has been said before, very general topic areas. So manufacturing and maintenance, that would include things like painting and plating and other processes that take place when you're building a weapon system. And a lot of this is elimination of hazardous materials like heavy metals or solvents, and doing things in a smarter, more efficient, more effective manner that reduces the environmental footprint. In the energetics materials area, the second major bullet, we're looking at alternative methods for manufacturing, for formulating these materials, monitoring and controlling the emissions when we're getting rid of or demilitarizing these systems, and that demilitarization process. Waste reduction across the board is kind of applies to things that we're doing at forward operating bases, the materials that we generate there, how are we getting rid of them, and we include ship painting and other aspects of waste reduction in this topic area as well. Firefighting has been a major focus of our program over the last couple of years, and we're interested not only in alternative formulations that are at that level of maturity that they're ready to be demonstrated and validated, but we're also looking for alternative technologies for application of firefighting agents. And finally, we do have that area for technology transfer approaches. With that, I pass it on to Tim Tatro for Installation, Energy, and Water.
All right, thank you, Robin. So for Installation, Energy, and Water, all of the topics that we'll be following here, I'll be talking about, are presented both in the broad agency announcement as well as for the DoD and calls for proposals from federal organizations outside of DoD. So they're all the same. Next slide, please. The first topic is one that we've issued also last year, and it's kind of a evolution from one that was issued earlier, and really focused on technology transfer, but in this case specific to the energy services companies that are a key stakeholder for development of energy and water solutions and military installations. So we're targeting the ESCO community and seeking their solutions that they consider to be viable and potential to be implemented through performance contracts or utility energy services contracts on military installations. So the technologies here that we're looking at are going to be more mature, likely commercially available already, but have not yet been used in military installations yet. So it's an opportunity for ESCOs to become familiar with technologies that they see have promise in application on military installations, but for their understanding of actually true costs and performance when deployed, integrating with military installation infrastructure. We encourage the ESCOs to who are interested to look at our past ESTCP technologies to consider them as solutions that they may be demonstrating, but also just open it up to solutions that they all feel are have particular benefit and potential. If you go to our look at the topic online, you'll see a list of technologies that we've highlighted for your interest. Next slide, please. This topic is another one that has been issued for the past couple of years and is written quite broadly, so provides opportunity for a variety of potential solutions and focused on improving energy resilience on our DoD installations. In particular, we're looking for solutions that leverage existing infrastructure, including maybe on-site solar photovoltaic systems or other on-site generation. We're also in this case with the planned transition to electric non-tactical vehicles. We expect there will be increase in new charging infrastructure as well as electric vehicles, and we're interested in understanding the any energy resilience implications and looking for solutions to ensure vehicles can perform their intended mission. And you can see the list here of other examples of areas of interest, but we're interested in not interested, in solutions that are kind of unique to an installation or that do not have broad applicability. Those would be considered non-responsive. Next slide, please. This topic, we're looking specifically at solutions to improve space heating and water heating efficiency, and really kind of what is of particular interest are demonstrations of new air source heat pumps or heat pump water heating technologies, or solutions to accelerate the deployment of already traditional heat pump technologies to get those solutions deployed more broadly and get more experience out in the field with these new technologies. In particular, we're interested in expanding the performance of these heat pumps up in colder climates, and that's an area of kind of new development, new advancement for heat pumps to expand kind of where they are applicable. We're also looking for solutions to manage the electrical peak demand and reduce the overall operations and maintenance costs. Next slide, please. The related topic is focused on heating thermal solutions, but this one is a kind of district system. So we're looking for solutions to deploy thermal microgrids to improve energy efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So this topic is seeking solutions that are integrating district energy, district thermal systems to simultaneously serve variable heating and cooling loads across a group of co-located buildings. So this really is looking at kind of electrification as a solution to reduce on-site fuel-fired heating systems and to optimize kind of the design of our thermal systems to leverage the opportunities across multiple buildings versus single building solutions. This topic area is going to require some significant integration. So work to reduce the risk of moving into a demonstration. We're going to start off with a phase 1, which is to be conducting feasibility study first. So what we're going to be asking for are proposals only for phase 1 to conduct these studies. But we're looking for in these proposals, an explanation of the approach that you're going to take, the types of technologies that would be considered, and understanding how you would approach the life cycle cost analysis, as well as the modeling approach to perform that analysis. The proposals that move forward from pre-proposal to full proposal, we will work with the teams to identify a site to collaborate with as you're developing full proposals if you are asked to go on beyond the pre-proposal. We ask that you follow the general instructions when developing your pre-proposal, although this is slightly different because it is a study only. So we do provide some kind of unique specific instructions in the detailed topic description. So please follow that when you're responding to this topic. Next slide, please. Next topic is improved life cycle management of packaged heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. This topic is trying to address the issue of the large number of packaged HVAC systems that the department has in the field. They are generally, they're widely used and generally kind of installed and left to do their thing, and can over time become inefficient for a number of reasons. And this topic is really trying to get at, trying to find solutions to improve the overall approach that we have at the department for managing this fleet of packaged HVAC units. So there are a number of elements, or I think aspects to this problem area, from improvements to the individual technology efficiency, to improved approaches to maintaining these systems, better ways to design and contract for the replacement, ways to use performance contracts or utility energy services contracts to better ensure ongoing performance or optimization of system performance over the life cycle, and on and on. There's a lot of ways that these can be improved. It's just a complex challenge that the department faces. So we anticipate a range of solutions to be explored here.
Tim, we're getting close to the question time. You're going to have to pick it up a little bit.
Okay. All right. Next slide. Yeah, this next one is improved water resilience. It's pretty straightforward. One of the challenges we face is a lack of high fidelity data on how our water is being used. So this is focused on water metering, but there are other elements to this problem space. But overall, we're looking for a better understanding of how water is being used on our installations so that we can understand and focus on solutions and understand the impact of improvements to those infrastructure. Next slide. These next two are kind of new areas and will be conducted in phases. So phase one will be, again, a study. In this case, we're looking for impact of climate change on DoD buildings and building components. And so we're looking to better understand how changing climate is impacting our buildings and building components that are exposed to that changing climate. So to begin with, we're looking at studies to help us understand the various elements of this problem space. And then following phase one, we will be those proposals or projects that are successful, we will be inviting to submit proposals for demonstrations. Next slide. And then similar to that last one, we're looking for, again, a new area of interest is in impacts of climate change on our DoD water infrastructure. So with increased stresses from climate change on the water infrastructure, we're looking to better understand how those are affecting kind of our existing infrastructure and looking for ways to build out solutions over time and analyze kind of our current vulnerabilities. Again, these will be performed in two phases. The first phase will be asking for studies only, followed by potentially a demonstration of solutions that were identified at that first phase. And next slide, I think, is the last. And again, this is the innovative approaches for technology transfer is available to all interested audiences, so through the open BAA, DoD, and also non-DoD federal agencies. And that, I think, wraps it up. And the next slide is our website, where you can find more information on all of these topics. With that, I'll hand it back to Herb.
Well, I think actually back to Laura. She's the question master.
Okay.
Yes, so we've received a number of questions. And so we'll start off with ones that are more general solicitation questions that we've received. So first, this question is for Andrea. How do we research what technologies are already covered in the past?
Thank you, Laura. The best way to do that is to go to our website, which is certip-estcp.org. And if someone could help me out and put that official link in the chat room, that would probably be nice. Just although if you are here, you probably are aware of our website. On that website, for every project we fund, we have a project webpage. And on the project webpage, that serves as a repository for any public documents that are generated from the project. That would certainly include the final report. It also includes any kind of technology transition products. And you can use the search bar to search for topic areas, et cetera, to locate all of that information. Back to you, Laura.
This next question is for Herb. What is the length in terms of page count in the full proposal?
Okay, so there's two answers to that. The meat of the proposal is limited to 15 pages. That's compared to the 5 pages for the pre-proposal. But just like in the pre-proposal, there are some appendices that don't count against that. The CVs of the team, some of the supporting data on cost, those kind of things don't count. But 15 pages is the answer, the direct answer to that question.
And then this next question is for Andrea. Could you please clarify the stage at which the DoD liaison is identified? Is that for successful pre-proposals?
Yes, it is for successful pre-proposals. When we do our pre-proposal review for all proposals that are selected to move on, and we're going to get the full proposal from them. If you are not a DoD entity, we will assign a DoD liaison to you. I should also caveat that if the proposal is led by someone who's not with the DoD, but you have a co-performer with the DoD, we generally do not assign a liaison at that point. We're assuming that your DoD co-performer will serve that role.
All right. This next question is for Herb. Can an industry performer partner with another organization, such as another industry or research organization, and submit a combined proposal?
Yes, absolutely. It's not at all unusual to get a team, and by a team, it can be a couple of faculty at a university, people at two different universities, university, industry, I'm going to say them all, huh? Industry, DoD. So none of those things are out of the norm for us. We get all sorts of teaming arrangements.
All right, and this question is for Andrea. For the technology transfer approaches topic, do the technologies need to come from past CERTIP and ESTCP projects?
It really is not limited to that. It's certainly encouraged, but if there is a technology that would be of interest and use for the DoD, and you can make the case for it in your pre-proposal that this would be important to the DoD, then that can be considered. You know, for example, there have on occasion been technologies that have been developed at a particular lab within the DoD, and you know, certainly that would be eligible to be considered for a technology transfer approach. Back to you, Laura.
This next question is for Herb. Can you discuss a bit on how DoD or DOE federally funded research and development centers would submit proposals or participate in submissions? Would they submit through the DoD or other federal organization submission processes? Do they need to partner with a DoD or federal partner?
So let's start with the second half of that, which is a lot easier. No, they don't have to partner with a DoD or federal partner. And I'm going to broaden this question out a little bit. That's also true for university, private sector people, and other non-federal people. A federal partner is not required. Okay, now to the first half of the question, we don't seem to have a good answer for what DOE federally funded R&D centers do. We assume that they apply to the other federal government calls, but if you will send us an email, we'll get back to you with the exact answer on that. We've not had many of those in the past. DOD FFRDCs would respond to the DOD call.
This is another general question, but may relate more to the weapon systems and platforms program area. So Robin, this question is for you. If you would map the maturity you are looking for to technology readiness level, what would that be? Is there an expected technology readiness level at the beginning of the project? And is this different from the technology readiness level at the end of the project?
Thank you, Laura. So I'm going to give two answers to that question. I'm going to give an example as well. But the two answers, the first one is we do allow a little bit of development on the incoming side, but it can't be a huge amount. It's got to be something that can be accomplished in a few months with a minimal expenditure. But the other answer to the question, if we're talking TRLs, is they should come in after TRL 4 or after TRL 5, meaning that their breadboard or breadboard validation has been completed. And then we get into TRL 6, that's prototype, and TRL 7, where that prototype is demonstrated. So we want them to exit at TRL 7. We'd love if they exited at TRL 8. So it's a range of answers. Generally speaking, projects are coming in at TRL 5, 6 and exiting at 7 or 8 is the expectation. Now, let me give an example of that. I've got a paint. I made that paint in the laboratory and I've got 100 mils of it in a round bottom flask. Yeah, you're not ready for ESTCP. You've got to have enough to do something realistic with it. So the question is, are you ready to demonstrate something in a militarily significant environment? I hope that answers the question, but that's what I have on that. Thank you.
And I have a follow-up question to that same topic for Herb. When a technology is ready for startup, or when is a technology ready for startup, or when is it ready for ESTCP? Dr. Nelson stated that prior startup funding, is not required for ESTCP, but is there some other lab to field transition research expected?
So great. Thank you, Laura, for that question. And we did these in back to back, the Robin question just before this about TRL, because Robin is much more fluent in TRL than I am. And so I'm going to give Robin the same answer, but just in a different way. So investigations or proposals that are appropriate for CERTA are things that still are answering science questions. So we're looking at mechanisms. We're looking at byproducts of the reaction. Robin's paint thing may be, can we get the paint purified? And if we apply it to a coupon, can we get it to cure in a reasonable amount of time? And it works against some laboratory scratch test or something. All of those science type questions should be answered by the time we get to ESTCP. So in ESTCP, what we're looking at is, we know it works in the laboratory. We know it works in a little test plot in the backyard or a test stand. Robin's paints, they've been on a test stand out in the down by the beach near the university or something. Now, when we go to ESTCP, it's, do these work in real world conditions where we don't control all the background, where we don't control all the confounding environments. And so I think of the differentiation between two programs in that sense. I hope one of the two of us answered your question.
Okay, we have a couple questions that are asking about phase 1 and phase 2 of proposals. So I'll give this next question to Tim. So the calls mentioned phase 1 and phase 2 of the proposals. Can you elaborate more on what these are and how they impact project duration and budget?
Yeah, good question. So there are a few topics out there that explicitly say they're going to be performed in 2 phases. Phase 1 being an analysis. So that is a written labor-only assessment. I mean, maybe there's some data collection on them, but there's no physical demonstration conducted. So we expect these to be shorter in duration, lower cost, but it provides for deeper kind of understanding of what a demonstration project might require at a specific installation. So the assessment should be done, it could be done at a single installation and then extrapolated broadly across the installation for applicability. And there might be some outcomes from that analysis that highlight specific technological solutions that the analysis team would propose for a follow-on project. So that would be a separate contracting action, a separate proposal. So what we're asking for phase 1 is really an analysis and a report for the analysis that was done in that phase 1. There should be short in duration and lower cost, typically. There's also a topic in there that says either or. We're certainly open to, under any of these topics that we're asking for demonstrations, the PI might suggest that, well, I'd like to study this problem in greater detail. Certainly open to that as well. But some of the topics are written explicitly. Phase 1, phase 2, we are asking for proposals for analysis only for phase 1. Hopefully that answers the question.
This next question is for the Resource Conservation Resiliency Program area. If there is a biocontrol agent that shows promise for being effective at controlling an invasive weed, but needs to be further tested under field conditions in the United States, would this be unsuitable for ESTCP because more baseline data is needed?
Yeah, a couple of points there. First, as Dr. Nelson mentioned at the start, we really don't want to get into the specific suitability of a particular project. And having said that, I would also kind of reflect back to the description that both Robin and Dr. Nelson outlined just a moment ago regarding the difference between CERDIP and ESTCP. And finally, to whoever is proposing that question, I would invite them to submit a pre-proposal. Thanks.
This next question is for the Environmental Restoration Program area. Will ponds be considered for the remediation of munitions constituents and sediments?
That would still fall under an applicable area for sediments. It's you know, under ESTCP, we don't like to do demonstrations that have a limited applicability outside that initial site. So definitely on the pre-proposal, you should make the case where, you know, that data from ponds is still applicable to a number of different sites, military installations across the country. You know, certainly with sediments, the harbors and rivers are probably a more urgent need, or some marine sediments, but I know there are a number of ponds on some installations, so that would still be applicable. Over to you, Laura.
This next question is for Tim. Will only current ESPCs or UESCs be considered?
No, I think I understand where this question is coming from. So these proposals for demonstrations under that topic focused on ESCOs does not require that the demonstration be at all integrated with an active performance contract or utility energy services contract. It's just stating in there that we expect that technologies that are proposed for demonstration have the potential and are, you know, likely following the demonstration to be performed through a performance contract or utility energy services contract in the future. It does not need to be integrated in the demonstration portion of the project.
This next question is for Herb. How much funding is devoted to this program and to each project?
Okay, Laura, I'm going to answer that one. There's another couple of resource type questions in the queue, so I'm just going to answer all of them in this answer. So there is no particular limit or presupposed amount of money set aside to each project. The budget of ESTCP is something like $70 million in fiscal year 22, slated to grow a little bit in fiscal year 23, but slated is a very open word. The president's budget request has not been finalized, and then the Congress's action on that is obviously not even started because the president submitted the budget request. So let's go with something like $50 to $70 million is the total budget of ESTCP. The average demonstration is 2 or 3 years, which means the new starts are something like a third of that or 40% of that. So you can do the math. We have an idea going in how much money is devoted to each of the program areas, and that's really a basis of DoD need, but those are not hard numbers. We're certainly not going to fund a poor demonstration in one program area just because there's some money initially evaluated to that. The other question I want to bring in this that's related is, what's the range of demonstration support? So there is a range, of course, but it's very, very broad. Some of the installation energy projects are very capital intensive, so they have very high costs. The demonstration could easily be $1.5 million total. Some of the maybe something on a paint line in a DoD depot could be pretty small. It could be $300,000, $400,000. So I can certainly give you a range, but it's not such a useful thing because it really depends on how capital intensive the technology you're going to do is, and then of course how labor intensive. But the ones that are expensive tend to be very capital intensive.
Okay, this next question is for Andrea. In several topic areas, there seem to be a few areas of focus. Will the pre-proposal need to focus on a single solution or address an integrated solution that may solve multiple problems?
I'm going to talk more from the perspective of environmental restoration initially, and I'm going to ask the other program managers to jump in if they have any topics that are specifically different. But I can certainly say under environmental restoration, we do list a number of subtopics. We would not at all imagine that anyone will put in a proposal that addresses all. That would be, most of these topic areas are written very broadly, so that I can't even conceive of a proposal that large that could address everything we listed. If there's any program managers, that you think if you released a topic area that was different where someone has to release, address every single objective, please chime in at this point.
I'll add to that. I think I have seen some proposals that assume that is a requirement, and as a result, they are fairly complex and don't really combine well. So I would look at where does it make sense for these subtopic areas to be combined and look at it that way.
Isn't it true that they often the topic says proposals must address one or more of the following topic areas? That's our general language, isn't it?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. That is definitely our general language under CERDIP, but I think we try to be careful under the ESTCP topics as well, where we say, the following are of interest, but maybe it was not clear. Back to you, Laura.
Okay. This question is for the Weapon Systems and Platforms program area. There was a section on alternative materials, specifically demonstrating new propellants. During the presentation, this was not stated in the slides. Is this still of concern?
Very easy answer, and that is yes, it is. So energetic materials and formulations, we accept proposals in propulsion, and we're looking for something that's an environmental solution. So you have to have an example where you're eliminating something objectionable, whether that be lead or some objectionable thing like ammonium perchlorate, and there has to be a reason to be doing it. So you have to start off with, well, what's the environmental problem that I'm solving? But yes, propellants are certainly part of the energetics area. Over.
This next question is for Dave. Many of the topic areas outline physical technologies. However, would ESTCP consider proposals which involve the use of big data analytics or the application of AI or machine learning to augment existing technologies or solve existing problems?
It's a very good question. The answer, sort of short answer, is yes and yes. We are already funding a number of investigators in the machine language end of things. A lot of the sensors that we are working with have enormous bandwidths, and the combination of the bandwidths, the variation in the environment, the target disposition, all lead to just enormous amounts of data. So again, for emphasis, yes and yes. Back to you, Laura.
This is a general question for Herb. Is a foreign company eligible for ESTCP?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. We have several foreign companies involved. Remembering, though, that the goal of ESTCP is to do the demonstration on a U.S. Department of Defense installation. So you can't really do it at home. If you're a foreign company, you have to do it in the United States.
Okay, this next question is for Andrea. Is there a pre-proposal template available? Also, are there examples that we can refer to?
We have neither a template or don't have a formal template, and we do not have examples. But we do list all of the sections that you would need to have in a pre-proposal and the instructions for those. So I think it lays out pretty clearly what you would need to have in there. Back to you, Laura.
Okay, This question is for Kurt. What is the emphasis of analyzing the impacts of weather events on DoD installations? What is the timeline for phase 1 and phase 2?
Yeah, great question. So as many of you are aware, 2020 marked the 10th consecutive year with $8 or more billion weather-related disasters, and the 6th year with 10 or more billion dollar disasters that directly affected the United States. Now we realize the attribution that those disasters can't be directly attributed to climate change. But the administration earlier this last year issued Executive Order 14008, tackling the climate crisis at home. And that was followed up by Defense Secretary Austin's statement that enforces the need for DoD to prioritize climate change considerations to mitigate insecurity. And so I would recommend and suggest to you that this call is directly related to our need to understand those impacts on our installations. And the timeline in terms of the time step are the time steps that are key for extreme weather and climate change, which are in the range of, now we're looking at both instantaneous, but really 10 to 20 years. And what we're looking to do is to incorporate those into that understanding into our installation master planning efforts. So I hope that answers the question. And I think Tim did a really good job in terms of laying out the differences between phase 1 analysis and feasibility and phase 2 activities. We're specifically asking for phase 1 proposals. Thanks.
This next question is for Tim. Is it okay to submit analytical approaches or tools versus technology demonstrations for certain topics? For example, topic D10, improved water resilience on DoD installations, seems to be requesting ideas for both analytical approaches and technology demonstrations.
Yeah, so this topic, I guess in particular, is open to both. We anticipate that there may be proved analytical approaches, and that might be a study versus a demonstration of a physical technology. So you could do both. Demonstration of some new data acquisition solution plus an analytical approach or combined. So I think if that's the question, if I understand that correctly, yes, that is meets the purpose of the topic. I don't know, Herb, did you hear that question differently?
Yes, sir, and I think you gave a good answer.
Okay.
This next question is for Andrea. What is the minimum volume treated per day under the classification of demonstration? Is 1 gallon per day qualified to be a pilot plant demonstration?
We don't have formal guidelines for that, but I would say that at a pilot plant, you want to be approaching what would be the commercial scale, and certainly something that's a full treatment plant scale would be quite different from a technology you might be doing for a mobile on-site. But even in either of those cases, I would say 1 gallon per day is probably a little small for a pilot plant. I think you need to be getting up to a larger scale there. Over to you, Laura.
This next question is for Dave, and they're specifically referencing on slide 28 for detection, classification, localization, and remediation of military munitions in underwater environments for the first bullet point. Their question is there a map that shows where the current underwater munition sites are that are of interest that they can get a copy of?
Good question. There is a global scale map, which probably is not of all that much help, but the sites are certainly well known. So there's no mystery in that regard. Probably the simple thing to do is just contact me. If you have interest in a particular location, because of the characteristics there or some circumstance logistic wise, just contact and we can readily provide answers. Back to you, Laura.
Okay. This next question is for Kurt. Are the improved wildland fire management tools focused exclusively on DoD installations?
Yeah, so the answer to that question is yes and no. The key element and what's implied behind that question is perhaps I don't want to say a lack of understanding, but there needs to be a understanding of the difference in the way the Department of Defense manages its wildland fire activity compared to, let's say, other entities such as the Forest Service. Is that one of our interests in wildland fire is as a federal entity, our training lands, as part of training, there's pyrotechnics and bombs that are dropped in the impact areas on target arrays. And so our management of wildland fire has to be focused on managing the results of those training activities. So that's an element of how we manage our lands that has no equivalent in the civilian side. So having said that, however, the tools that are developed, for example, using prescribed fire, would certainly be available, and we communicate very closely with our colleagues and researchers in the Forest Service, for example, to have open access to tools as we develop them for civilian applications. But that's not the particular focus. We don't go out looking to develop a civilian application tool. We're looking to develop wildland fire management tools that are needed for the Department of Defense. Thanks.
This question is for Tim. Does a geothermal related project fall under the improving climate resilience topic?
This is a good question, and one I think that comes up frequently. Asking about which topic is most appropriate for specific technology, and I think the answer I'll answer generically in that we have especially in my program, we have a number of topics, some of them you can see overlap, and so it may be difficult. It really is not that big of a deal, right? We're all going to be reviewing these, and we will potentially move them into the one that makes the most sense. So as long as it falls within a topic that makes sense to you, I wouldn't worry too much about it. If we see that it makes sense in a different one, we'll move it, but it's not going to impact the review of that proposal that's submitted.
This next question is for Andrea. Do you have any additional examples of demonstration questions?
Yeah, I saw this question come through when Herb was kind of talking about the generics, and it's hard to tell you what a specific demonstration question is, but what I would recommend that you do is look at the requirements for demonstration plans in the program area under which you're going to apply. Those demonstration plan templates are all available under investigator resources on the CERTIP and ESTCP website. And what they do is there's a performance objectives table in there that lays out pretty clearly how are you going to evaluate the technology. And so I'll talk from environmental restoration. A clear one is always evaluating the disappearance of the chemical of concern and evaluating the products that might be generated, things like that. So it's going to be very specific to your technology. But if you look at that table for crafting your performance objectives, I think that will help you to develop those questions. Back to you, Laura.
This is another question for you, Andrea. If our technology addresses two topic areas, should we submit two pre-proposals, or is there a way to use the same pre-proposal to address both topics?
This kind of touches on what Tim just said about the, if you're, don't stress too much about exactly which topic area, because we do look at them all and we'll sort them accordingly. However, please do not submit the same pre-proposal to multiple topic areas. Just pick the one that's most appropriate and submit it there. If you have an idea that you think spans more than one topic area, you're going to have to pick one. So what I would suggest, if it's really integral that they be combined, pick the topic area that is most applicable to. If it's truly like two different ideas, you could separate those out into two separate pre-proposals and submit to two separate topics, but that's going to be your call on whether they really have got to be together or they can be separated, but please only submit one pre-proposal and then we'll sort it out. Back to you, Laura.
This question is for Herb. Can you address the intellectual property rights that the government has versus what the company retains if a proposal is selected and proves viable?
Yes, I can answer that question in the most general terms. I'm clearly not an intellectual property attorney, so you would have to talk to get detailed answer to that. ESTCP utilizes contracts for their interactions with the private sector. So all of the usual intellectual property clauses that are in a DoD or a federal government, for that matter, contract apply. If a company brings IP to the table, then of course they own it. If it's developed with our funding, then we both have joint rights. For more detail than that, I think you would have to dig deep into the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation clauses on intellectual property.
This is a question for Andrea. Will ex situ PFAS soil treatment technology demonstrations be a good fit for the topic of management of impact groundwater?
I think it would typically fit because that is so integrally tied to the issue of groundwater that I think you can safely submit it under that topic area. Back to you, Laura.
This is a question for Tim. Would you consider projects on nature-based solutions for flood control of communities and installations?
Yeah, I think that was, if it wasn't explicitly written in there, we're considering natural infrastructure and kind of physical infrastructure, part of the same objective here.
This question is for Andrea. Can an organization currently funded under this program apply for the upcoming call for proposal?
Yes, we don't limit you in that regard. So even if you're currently funded by us, you can still submit another proposal as well. Back to you, Laura.
This is a question for Tim. Can you elaborate on what cost sharing means?
Yeah, I think that in the ESCO topic was written, one of the criteria, but interest aspects or that we're interested in is potential for cost sharing. In that specific case, the idea there is we are hoping that ESCOs would show strong interest in a technology by contributing more than just a little bit of labor, but possibly contributing additional cost share in some way. It's not required. It's just something that would show a strong interest, basically.
Laura, I think we're getting near the end of our time. Maybe there's one or so more questions and then we can finish up.
Great. I'll end with one more general question. And then for any remaining questions that are specific to a topic or a technology, you can always reach out to the program manager for that specific program area. So the last question is, how many teams are funded for the same topic? Is this based on previous efforts? Is it possible to have more than one in general?
Okay, well, I'm going to take that question when you use the word teams questioner in that, I think you mean demonstration teams. So that's what I'm going to answer. Yes, we have an expectation that there will be more than one award per topic. Now, that's not always the case. We only make awards to deserving proposals. So if there is only one deserving proposal on a topic, we may only fund one, but that's rare. We generally would have a number of competing proposals or allied proposals under each topic. And so with that, I'd like to thank everybody. We had a very large number of questions today. We sort of went bananas with the number of questions that came in. So that's good. Sometimes we have groups that are not very questioning. So we're digging deep to fill the time, but not today. So we thank you all for your attendance and good luck in your submissions.
All right, thanks everyone too.